tonight's workshop is called Lawn Transformation on a Budget. And we are going to go through some of the steps of transformation, what we think you should probably do yourself if you can, and things that you really could get some professional guidance on and would probably benefit from professional guidance with. Well, I very much want to thank Valley Water for sponsoring this evening's workshop and introduce you to Nick Simard from Valley Water. Nick, do you want to take over the reins here or have me? I will happily move it forward, but
yeah, perfect. Thanks, Pamela. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. My name is Nick Simard. I'm a water conservation specialist here with Valley Water, and we're really glad to have you joining us here tonight to learn more about lawn transformations on a budget. And being on a budget, getting a rebate might help push some of these projects forward. So I'm about to tell you about all those resources that we at Valley Water have to offer. So why is conservation important? It's a pretty neutral issue here that everyone wants to save money, and conserving water not only saves money by saving water, but it also saves money by saving energy for you and the grid in general. It also ensures that we have a reliable water supply through the future. And it really reduces our dependence on imported water. Here at Valley Water, every drop saved is a drop we don't need to import or pump from the ground. So we want to keep that atmosphere going and that momentum going. Next slide, please. So just a quick look at water use throughout the county. So it's around half indoor and half outdoor. And a lot of it on the indoor side goes to toilet use, showers, which is behavioral, conservation use. And then there's also leaks. So 12% goes to leaks. That's 12% that is being completely wasted. So we can target indoor and outdoor water use and eliminate leaks. That will really improve your water use efficiency. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of an overview. We have a lot of different rebates, free programs, or resources that Valley Water's conservation team offers. This is just a little list of all of them put out there, but I'm about to go into detail slide by slide as we go through this presentation here. So we have our online shopping cart. Here's where I'm coming in with some free resources. So you can order indoor fixtures such as aerators, shower heads. We have indoor leak detection tablets for your toilet. We have hose nozzles, as you can see in the photo as well, toilet flappers. And then we have like practical plumbing guides. Pamela shared a couple slides back the sustainable landscape guidelines. If you wanted to download the PDF from that source, we have it in a few different languages. You could do that, or you can order through the shopping cart a physical copy, which is always really nice to have. It's beautifully printed. And we'll send it to you along with any of these items that you'd like for no cost, not even shipping, as long as you're sending it to an address within the county. Next slide, please. We also offer some landscape surveys. So I actually manage our watershed-wise outdoor survey program. So if you have a residential site or commercial site, half acre or less, we can come out. We'll have an irrigation professional turn on your whole irrigation system, and they'll check your water meter. They'll inspect for leaks, and they can even recommend obviously any repairs that need to be made, but also maybe something's not broken, but it's very outdated and extremely inefficient. They can recommend what you could potentially get a rebate for, or the best available technology to again increase your outdoor water efficiency. It's a completely free program, like I just said. And then for larger, if you're a business owner or maybe you manage a large property, commercial, institutional, industrial, or multifamily property over the half acre, we have our large landscape program, which analyzes that water use for that site. It can look at the landscape and see how much it should be watering based on how much grass, shrubs, different plant matter is there, and then give that site a water budget to adhere to. So they have a goal and a baseline. We have our landscape rebate program. This is probably the most relevant to this webinar. So you can get up to $3,000 for replacing high water use landscapes such as grass or pools. with a low water use landscape. And you can see there's an example here. Pamela and company are about to show us some even better examples. And then we also, for commercial sites, we have a lawn to mulch program as well. So if you're in a commercial or a multifamily property of more than 5, you could also just put mulch down for a lesser rebate and remove the lawn as well. So we also have our landscape design assistance program. So if you have a front yard and you're doing a landscape conversion there through our rebate program, you would get a basic design after a 1 or 2 hour consultation for $200. And if you were to complete the project per our requirements, you would get back that $200 through the rebate at the end. So typically, for reference, a typical landscape design is $800 to $2,000 up to $2,000. So yeah, very useful resource. We also offer a whole bunch of do-it-yourself resources online, and Pamela and company is about to teach you all about how to do this on a budget, and this is just more support for that with plant list templates such as South Bay Green Gardens or the CalScape, which is the California Native Plant Society's Bay Area Garden Planner tool. Next slide, please. We have other elements of our landscape rebate program, such as irrigation upgrades. So I mentioned that during those free surveys. If you wanted to convert areas outside of your lawn that have overhead irrigation to an inline drip system, we'd offer rebates for that. If you wanted to upgrade overhead irrigation, if you're wanting to keep that as much as it should be limited, you could get the most efficient models of that overhead irrigation. And then smart controllers, so weather-based irrigation controllers. It's a really great way to have more autonomy over your irrigation system, and you'd have access connected to your phone, and you can connect it with some really great other tools such as a flow sensor or a rain sensor as well. And we offer rebates for all of them. And then there's rainwater capture elements of the program. So if you wanted to put a rain barrel down to collect that rain, I know in a couple months we're going to have a rainwater capture webinar here for you all to tune into as well, or implement a rain garden, which you can see in the 2 photos left and right. We offer rebates for those as well, and they all work really great together with the landscape rebate program. We offer our gray water laundry landscape rebate. So if you wanted to convert or reuse your laundry water after it's been washed, you can send it to your plants for shrubs, flowers, and trees. Reuse that water, and we'd give you a rebate of between $200 and $400 depending on who your water retailer is. So I mean, we do have a water waste service or ordinance. If you see blatant water being wasted, there is a way you can report it to us, and we'll take an educational approach and let that site know that there's water being wasted. I wake up very early in the morning, for example, and see irrigation heads that are missing or damaged, that are geysering. Maybe the site owner doesn't see that because they don't wake up early in the morning and they don't see their irrigation going off. So I can have a chance to report it. They'd get a letter in the mail saying, we noticed this water being wasted in this manner, and they'll have an opportunity to fix it.
Okay. All right. So this evening's workshop is organized into these 6 elements. We're going to start with a little bit about just shaping your vision, getting you oriented to starting to think about making a change to your landscape. Talk a little bit about the key elements of a garden so that you can set your priorities and then determine what are your priorities. Then we'll talk about what are the things that really you could invest in by having a professional, or even things that you're going to invest in where it's going to be a little bit more expensive to do the work, and then things that you would be able to save on as you do your transformation. We'll go into some other resources for ways to save, maybe prompt your creative juices to flow, and then have some last thoughts about the importance of doing this kind of work. All right. Well, what is the vision? I mean, why are we doing this landscape transformation anyway? In the beginning, there was grass and, it's not that, it's not that inspiring really to take a look at. It may be in various states of disrepair, but it's essentially a monoculture. And I'm sure there are things that we could do to make this a lot better. And really, this requires that we start to dream a little bit. Landscaping is very much an endeavor that isn't just about, hey, change one plant for another. It's about creating an experience. I like to say that landscaping is a performance art. It changes every day. It's going to grow and be different next year from what it is this year. So take a little time to imagine what you are interested in doing and write it down. Think about it. One of the things we always hear about for landscaping is that people want to have use of the outdoors. They want to dine with family and friends, or maybe there's the opportunity to create a transition from one part of a garden to another, a little secret passage. Um, uh, Many people would like to have many more flowers, things that are um, delighting their eyes. Certainly a pathway that takes you through the garden, and preferably one that meanders and doesn't go in a straight line. Maybe there's room for a water feature. Maybe there's room for 2 water features. Maybe you have kids or grandkids, nieces and nephews, and you'd like to create a place for them to be able to play in the garden, a children's garden. But often our dreams, are brought down to size, if you will, because we don't have enough of this one and we don't have a fairy godmother. So the question is, how do we balance time, creativity, looking to our community for resources, and also looking for unusual resources in order to create something that is unique to us, something that we can really enjoy, that we are going to be willing to take care of and steward over the coming years, but that will bring us an equal or a greater amount of pleasure. So what are the elements of the garden that we need to be thinking about? Well, really, when we just start talking about garden design or landscape design, the first thing that we sort of divide our conversation into is what elements are presented that are infrastructure elements. In other words, these are things that we have to build in order to maintain the garden or to be able to utilize the garden. The infrastructure is like the plumbing and the water, plumbing is water, the plumbing and the electrical, the surfaces. Start to think about the landscape in terms of it being an outdoor room. So what is the flooring? What do the walls look like? What do the ceilings look like, if there are any? Those are infrastructure elements. And then we have functionality. And functionality is really answering the question, how are we going to use this garden? What are the things that we need to have in order to draw us out there? Is there a particular part of the landscape that we are going to want to focus on? And also within functionality, we include a lot of the elements of garden design that we don't really have control over. Like, what is the sun quality in the landscape? How does water move through the landscape? Um, are there places that have shade? These are all elements of the garden that we are going to have to address as we do our design and our construction. Take a look at the roof. What is happening with gutters and downspouts? Where does the water go? The water coming from your roof is a free resource. Is there a way that we can store that in the landscape and utilize it to help our plant material reduce our irrigation? Do we live in a place that has topography? Are there hillside considerations? Are we at the top or the bottom of a slope? Is there erosion, whether we're on a slope or not? And these are all going to these are elements that are all going to contribute to the complexity of the design. What is the quality of our soil? This is something a lot of people overlook. And when we say the quality of soil, we're asking not just, do you have sand, silt, or clay? But we're also asking, does your soil behave like a brick or is it more like a sponge? Again, do you have sun or shade or a little bit of both? And what are the user experiences that you want to have? You know, here we have a garden that's pretty to look at. It has a meandering path, but most importantly, it's got a chair that you can sit in and enjoy the garden from. How are we going to move through the garden? Um, are there gathering areas that we're going to need to create? Um, how are we going to keep the materials that we use cost effective, permeable, which is what you see here, which means that water can go through them. Um, I, I want to draw your attention to actually a garden that I designed in the bottom right-hand corner. This pathway, there didn't used to be a pathway in this garden. It was just a lawn. But as soon as we put that pathway in there and then made that turn into the backyard, suddenly it became even more than a path. It became a mystery. Like even now, looking at it, I'm curious, what's happening after you make that turn? So these are things that we want to be thinking about as we move through our garden, as we create spaces to gather in. And as we plant or build shade structures. And of course, privacy. I mean, maybe your neighbor has a really ugly boat. I keep coming back to that in these presentations because I've dealt with that so many times where there's a boat or an RV or a really big something or other, a bus, and the neighbors are subjected to that every time they drive down the driveway. How do we block that view in a very narrow space? Privacy is a big deal. Do we want edible and medicinal gardens? And what kind of wildlife would we like to attract? Certainly, we would like to have insects and birds in our landscape, but there's other wildlife too. I mean, the fence lizards are super important. If we don't want to have ticks, we need to have the western fence lizard. So how do we find ways to attract wildlife and have them come back time and again? It's really wildlife that makes our gardens alive. Okay, well, those were some of the elements of a garden, and that was a pretty long list, I will admit. Question now is, how do we start setting priorities for what we are going to do in the garden? And I think it's important to start with the elephant in the room, so to speak, or maybe the elephant outside of the room. The very biggest ticket item that you are going to face in your landscape is anything that is a hardscape element or a structure. Hardscape is essentially the hard materials that create usually the floors, sometimes the walls and ceilings of our garden rooms or outdoor spaces. You see a couple of examples here, relatively small spaces. These places, hardscape is actually very important. We do want to minimize it in our landscapes so that it is being used in very particular places that we are going to gather and that plant material would not survive, where we need those hard surfaces in order to enjoy the space. But it is always going to be a trade-off between investing in hardscape and structures or investing in planting that might do the same kind of thing. And I'll draw your attention to the project on the left-hand side here. This was a narrow little space that had a very confusing entry. I mean, where that light fixture is on the left is where the entry is. Who would even know that that's where the front door was when you walked down this narrow space? But by turning it into a room, putting this open overhead structure and using the decking material and the steps and so forth, we really recreated that space, turned it into the first room that you are getting to when you come to the home. Now, I'm seeing a lot of people raising their hands, and I would like to ask Anna or Brent to go ahead and try to figure out why we have so many raised hands happening. We need to move people into the Q&A because we can't answer raised hands. So maybe open up the chat and ask people why the hands are being raised. Okay. Another thing to invest in your landscape is outdoor lighting. Doing outdoor lighting well, you may think it's oh, that's just a luxury to have. But the reality is that when the days are short, we still have great weather. And in order to use these outdoor rooms, having that outdoor lighting is really essential, low voltage lighting mostly. And you can do it very, very simply by just having pathways lit. And certainly for landscapes where you are going to be walking around in the garden, having pathways lit is really important. One thing I do want to bring to your attention is to make sure that you are taking into consideration what is called the dark sky movement. Dark skies are a approach to outdoor lighting that makes sure that we don't have any lights that are kind of going up into the sky to confuse birds and other creatures at night, and also that we do turn off the lighting at a reasonable time at night, that we don't have these glaring lights. They really do make problems for insects and birds and bats too, and others. So outdoor lighting is a consideration. It's not one you usually think about in landscaping, but we know if you're going to use it, you need to have it. Irrigation, another really important thing. Even if you are planning to reduce your irrigation to essentially rely on having no irrigation because your plant material is so healthy and robust over a period of time, that's great. But you're going to need the irrigation in order to get those plants established. So irrigation is an important infrastructure element of your garden, and you're going to need to make choices about whether you're going to be utilizing spray irrigation or drip irrigation or a combination of the two. But the most important thing that we would like you to be focusing on as you begin to create the priorities for your landscape is what we call the watershed approach. And the watershed approach is essentially showing you the 4 most important elements of building a healthy, resistant, vibrant landscape. And they start with soil. Building healthy living soil is the #1 thing that you can do to have a thriving landscape. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. The second most important thing is capturing rainwater. The reason that we call this the watershed approach is because we are evaluating this every single landscape as though it's a mini watershed. We're noting, where does water fall on that watershed? Is it the roof? And then where does it leave the property? Is it leaving on a driveway or a walkway? And we are taking steps to hold as much rainwater on the site as possible. Of course, building healthy living soil is a first thing to do in order to hold on to rainwater. You need to have a soil sponge in order to capture it, but then also contouring to create depressions in the landscape and redirecting downspouts so that the water actually goes into the landscape is really an important part of this building a healthy landscape. The third element is to select local and climate appropriate plants. So these are mostly local California native plants. You can get plants that are local right there to your county. And climate appropriate can be as far ranging as Mediterranean climates. But we want to find and plant those plants because they're adapted to our climate. They are not going to need additional input over time. And that's a really important consideration, especially for saving money. And then finally, when we do make this investment in irrigation, which is a considerable investment, we want to make sure that it is with highly efficient irrigation. We are getting the best manufacturing. We're making sure it's designed and installed correctly, and we're maintaining it. We are making sure that we are out there, a couple times a year, taking care of that irrigation system. And we also invest in irrigation control so that when we run our irrigation, it's not just because, oh, well, it's Tuesday, let's run the irrigation. It's because the plants actually need it. That's how we actually save water. So these four components are the most important thing for building a healthy living, healthy landscape, and having some place that you can live for a long time. Now, let's get into how much you're going to spend on things. Well, planning is really important. You've heard the phrase, I'm sure, uh, measure, I had to think about it for a second, measure twice, cut once. It applies with landscape design as well. The money that you spend on planning is really the most important money because it will help you to decide how you're going to allocate your entire budget. Expect to spend somewhere between 10 to 20% of your entire budget on the planning process. So if you're going to spend $10,000, let's say, on your landscape, you're going to actually spend 11,000, 10,000 on the installation, and another 1,000 on the planning. Now, the good news is in Valley Water area, you can get landscape design services for a pittance, and you can save money on the planning as well, but don't skip that step. As we mentioned in the watershed approach elements, soil is the foundation of the healthy landscape. You really, every single dollar that you put into building your healthy soil, you will get back in not just healthy plants, but also in a resilient landscape. Your irrigation budget will fall. You will keep stormwater from going off into the street, and your wildlife and everything really all comes back to healthy living soil. Expect to spend 10% of your budget. So if we go back to our $10,000 budget, expect to spend 1,000 of that on your soil. And really, even though it's 10% of the budget, it's almost, I would say almost 100% of the value, but it's 99% of the value. Creating that healthy living soil sponge is absolutely essential. And the only way that we can really do that, there are two ways we do it. One is we add organic matter, and we also plant a lot of plants. Those two things are what we have to do in order to create healthy living soil. We want soil that looks like this picture. And I pretty much guarantee you, if you currently have clay soil, it doesn't look like this. But rest assured, clay soil can look like that. We want to capture every free drop of rain. The way that we do that is by contouring the landscape and redirecting our downspouts into that landscape. Contouring the landscape basically means that there are no more flat yards. We want to have depressions, and we want to have slightly raised areas. Expect to spend 20% of your budget. So 2,000 of that $10,000 budget is going to go to contouring the land, to what we call grading, making these slight depressions, and also possibly to putting in gutters and downspouts in the key areas where you can get the water into the landscape. You want to select plants that require less water. And the way that you do that is you use the Cowscape service. Don't worry, you're going to get links to that. But selecting plants that require less water is just, I mean, first of all, these are mostly climate appropriate plants, but also it's sort of right out of the box, you are not irrigating as much. You don't need to irrigate as much because these plants actually will die if you irrigate them as much as you did the grass. These plants only want half or less of the water that you were applying to the grass. So we want to try to select plants that are low or very low water requiring. And the way that this chart works, we're basically indicating that these are plants that would only need 10 or 15 inches of water a year or even less when grass is requiring more than 50. So you can see these are plants, the low and very low water plants are plants that, right away are going to save us money and save us hassle. We also want to make sure not just that we're selecting low and very low and some moderate water requiring plants, but that we are also selecting a real diversity of those plants. When we make a landscape where we just basically have one or two plants and we just repeat it over and over and over again, that may seem very chic and modern, but actually it's little better than having a grass landscape. Plants need to have a lot of different friends and family around them. They need the diversity of plant structure in order to make sure that the soil is spongy. Remember, the plants are doing some work on making spongy soil. So when we select plants, we want to select low water and we want to have a diversity of those plants. And the best way to do that is sticking mostly with local native plants. This is actually important for us to remember that when we select plants that have a lot of diversity of structures above ground, it's reflected below ground too. So they're going to have these root structures that in some cases can create roots that are extremely deep. Now, we're not used to thinking about having plants in our landscape that have really deep roots. If we have grass, we have a plant that has a couple of inches of depth. But the plants that we are going to replace the grass with, the local California native plants, and especially when we have a diversity, we can get root structures that are 5, 6, and in this case, 15 feet deep. So we want to really be thinking about this in our planning process and make sure that we get that diverse above ground structure, which gives us a below ground structure. Also, when we plant diversely and extensively, so make sure we have a lot of density, what happens is pollinators are invited into the garden by those plants. And not just pollinators, but also natural predators. So if we want to have a situation where we don't have to be continuing an application of pesticide to get rid of bugs or herbicides to get rid of grasses and things, planting diversely and densely will actually bring us the natural solution to those problems, and it saves us a lot of money. So if we plan up front to have this diverse landscape, we can actually be planning to eliminate all the inputs down the road. Something that's not on this screen but should be is eliminates fertilizers as well. When you plant densely and diversely, you don't ever need a fertilizer again. So the priorities are a lot of natural solutions. They are thinking about your soil, grading for rainwater capture, making sure you're doing planning so that this is all planned out, and then selecting plant material that's local, highly diverse, planting densely. Well, if those are the priorities, how do we make the choice of whether to invest a lot of money in it or hire a professional even to do something? or maybe there are things we can do ourselves. And it comes down to this truism. uh, it's one of the first things I learned when I became a contractor. In the world where you're having work done or you're doing work, you really have a choice. You can select any two of these three elements. Uh, you can get something done very, very quickly, but it's going to cost you money to do that if you want to have good quality. Because if you want it done quickly and you don't spend the money, your quality is going to be diminished. So that is how we have to think about all of these choices. Sometimes taking the time to do something ourselves is really delicious. It gives us uh, a whole different sense of our landscape. And other times it's just really better for our soul to have someone come and take care of it. So we're going to go through some of these things. When we invest in professionals, of course, we save time. Well, I say of course, but I want to make sure that if you do hire a professional, you always in the contract have a start date and an end date. And maybe even some consequences for going beyond the end date without your approval. It's really important to keep professionals on a timeline. And the key, though, is you should be able to benefit from their experience having done a lot of these projects. If you're going to go for it and do it yourself, you can save quite a bit of money, but you have to be willing to learn from your mistakes. So, and it's okay to make mistakes. It's one of the great things about plant material as an example is I know I've had people who do it themselves and they complain, oh, I planted and it died. Well, that's a great learning experience. Plant material is relatively inexpensive when you compare it to moving earth and doing hardscape and all the other plumbing things and so forth. The plants are really one of the least expensive parts of the landscape. You can learn by killing some plants that they don't go in that place or you've overwatered them or whatever. So don't be afraid of making mistakes. Some of the benefits of doing it yourself are the ones that you have, anytime you do something yourself. Not only could it save you money, but it also gives you this deeper understanding of what the landscape is, a deeper appreciation for the growing of things. You see the process more clearly, and it often stimulates creativity. I think something that we kind of forget is that as humans, we are hardwired to have a relationship with the outdoors. And when we actually install our landscape and we are involved in designing it and then installing it, we get the benefit of that brain stimulation. It's actually a really important thing to keep us calm and keep us keep us in the world. From a design perspective, you can absolutely do it yourself. We teach a class on designing, and it's not that difficult. There are key things to remember. The book that you're going to be getting as a PDF or that you can order is a great guide for step-by-step doing the design. I would say that if you have a larger property, you may want to hire somebody to do the measuring of the property to create the base plan. It is, especially if you have a complicated situation like a hillside, or as I say, a larger property, setting the boundaries, getting all of that on a piece of paper so that you can play with it. It's a worthwhile investment to have someone come and survey it, do the topography and show you all of that. But if you are living in a relatively flat situation, smaller property, you can absolutely measure it and get the base plan down and start designing yourself. The guidebook is a great help. There are also some wonderful design and project templates on the Valley Water site. And I want to encourage Valley Water to put the link into the chat so that you can grab that link directly to show you some of these project templates. taking classes is another great way to do this, to learn how to do the design. Now, you can also work with a professional. And something to understand when you work with a professional is the more thinking that you've done beforehand about what your vision is for the landscape, the better. The best clients that ever came to me with a book. And that book had pictures that and nowadays, of course, it's not going to be a book, it's going to be online maybe, but it's pictures of things that that give them the vibe that they want, or plants that they really love. It might even be a tour of the neighborhood to show other landscapes that you admire. They even used to bring pictures of materials that they were interested in. And this is very helpful for a professional. The more organization that you can have beforehand, the better. The professional can't tell you what should happen to your landscape until they know what it is that you're interested in doing in your own home. If you have a hillside, even if it's a relatively gentle hillside, it might be worth it to hire a professional to help you with the design, at least for the hillside. And certainly, if you have any kind of steep hillside or erosion, you absolutely want to make sure that you have a professional. The professional that you hire is a civil engineer. You can also potentially hire a landscape architect, but in most cases, a civil engineer is going to be required in order to help you navigate the difficulties of working with a hillside. The liability of designing something on a hillside is really high, because if something moves, or if irrigation breaks, let's say, on the hillside, or if there's a flood that takes out a portion of the hillside, all of that liability could end up accruing to you if you have not hired a professional to do the thinking about how it should be done. Also, there are usually local restrictions on moving soil around, on doing rainwater capture, etc., on the hillside, and civil engineers know what all those rules are. So highly recommend that you hire a professional for your hillside. That said, we will give you some background to make choices in the rainwater harvesting class that we're going to be doing in a couple months, to just kind of help you decide what to do. But definitely hiring a professional is recommended. When you get into the construction phase of your project, there are going to be several things that you absolutely can do yourself. You could hire a professional to come and remove your grass. Now, there's a real movement afoot to not be applying herbicides onto the landscape. There are all kinds of issues with herbicides. So if you want to remove your grass without having to spray all that gunk, you can sod cut it. And this is hard work. Frankly, especially if you have a larger property, it's easy to do, but it does take time, and it can be hard work. And as you can see here, it's cutting it out, it's then picking it up, making sure it gets into some kind of disposal, and then of course disposing of it. So hiring a professional to do the sod cutting is a great alternative. But that said, it can be done yourself, especially if you have a smaller site. You can rent a sod cutter. It will fit in your car, unless you have a very tiny car, but even then they can be pretty small. I mean, it's a little unwieldy to get it in there, but you can rent it at a box store, and a big box store, and they'll get it in there. Or you might even be able to have it delivered by the big box store. The sod cutter will enable you to remove the grass, and then you can make a decision about whether you want to rent a dumpster in order to put that grass into it and have that removed, Or if you want to use that grass in some way, either cycling it through a compost pile or some other method, or maybe getting rid of it over time in a green bin. Really, again, try to resist the use of glyphosate, especially if you're going to do it yourself. Don't recommend that you apply the glyphosate. Um, that herbicide is something that is applied best by professionals. So it looks easy, but there can be consequences to misapplications of the herbicides. So if you're going to sod cut, try it yourself or hire a professional. When you dispose of the turf, as I said, probably the best way to do it is to order a dumpster that would be at your property, gets filled up with the grass, and then you're able to have it taken away. You can stockpile it and do it little by little, but the dumpster is usually the fastest way to do it. Now, after you've removed the grass, you are going to want to contour for rainwater capture. The good news about the rainwater capture is you don't need to dig very much in order to get a depression that is sufficient to hold on to the rainwater. You only need 6 inches deep, and you only need an area 150 square feet for every 1,000 square foot of roof. Don't worry, all that's in the book. But the point is, you don't need to dig any deeper than 6 inches. So it can be done yourself. Again, if you have any issues with your back, certainly, you may just want to hire people to do it, or of course, maybe recruit the grandkids. That's a possibility. Turning your soil into a soil sponge is the next step. So you've removed the grass, you've contoured for your rainwater capture. Now you're going to build your soil. And the way you do that is through a process called sheet mulching or sheet composting. And basically, this is putting layers of paper, compost, and mulch on the site, watering it in, and letting it kind of cook down and become really good soil and start the process of building your soil. After you do your sheet composting, then you're going to be planting into that lasagna, if you will. Don't worry, we show you how in the book, so there is a step-by-step in the book. It is something that is best done with many hands. I've tried to do it by myself. It's a big challenge. I was 30 years younger too. So really, I think that if you're going to be doing the sheet mulching or composting yourself, you're going to want to have a crew. So invite your friends and family to do it. Someone has to hold the hose at the same time you're rolling out the material. When you order compost or mulch, it's going to be a lot cheaper in bulk. So having a delivery to your site is going to be significantly less expensive than having it delivered in bags. I want to give you a sense of reference here by looking at this picture. What you're seeing here is about 10 yards of material. And this is mulch that you see here. 10 yards of mulch is what you are going to need to cover a 1,000 square foot landscape 3 to 4 inches deep with the mulch. And really, a 3 to 4 inch deep mulch covering is what you're going for. So this is what you're looking at. You're going to need a place to stage that mulch. Especially if you're doing it yourself to move it, you're going to need an open space like this to stage it. It's different if a crew is coming in to move it. They could move this in a day. As an individual, it's going to take you at least a weekend to move this mulch pile. The other thing is that this delivery is, this is probably a delivery from a place where the mulch was ordered and paid for. If you're getting a delivery that's a free delivery, it's likely that they are going to want to deliver 20 yards and in some cases 40 yards of mulch. So imagine 2 times this or even 4 times this. And that's just the reality of the big trucks that are used to do tree trimmings and gather mulch. If that's the case where you're using the free resource, you're probably going to want to tell your neighbors to come over with their wheelbarrows as fast as possible, because it's a lot of mulch to be blocking your driveway. When you plant, it's really the easiest thing you can do. We highly recommend that you do as much planting by yourself as possible. Again, instructions for planting are in the book, but it is absolutely the funnest thing to do and the easiest. You can use seed in order to grow your landscape, believe it or not. Put in some plants in containers and then use seed to fill in the gaps. Or you can even start root cuttings or start seeds in your home. This is probably the least expensive way to go with plants. But also, if you're going to be buying plants, we recommend that you buy your ground cover anyway, and even small plants in what are called flats. So this is an example of a flat. It's a thyme ground cover. And each one of these flats is going to give you 16 to 64 plants. Sometimes these flats come with 4-inch containers inside of them. And if that's the case, you're getting 16 individual plants. But when you get what's called a dirt flat, which is what you're looking at here, you can actually break this up into tiny little pieces and get 64 different plants from it. When you are ordering plants or purchasing them, you're going to be buying them by the gallon size of the container that the plants are in. And here we have 3 different typical plant sizes. On the left, we have what's called a 4-inch or a quart planter. We have a 1 gallon in the middle and a 5 gallon on the right. I want to remind you that when you do your planting, whether with a professional or by yourself, you're always wanting to plant the very smallest plant that you can. I know that sounds counterintuitive. We are in an instant gratification society, but when we plant very small plants, we are actually getting them more established in our landscape than they are in a can. And so they grow faster, they are usually hardier, and come on a lot better than the plant the next size up or even 2 sizes up. So even in this picture, I can see the little plant there in the quart container. That's a plant that gets to be, 3 or 4 feet wide, all around. Better to plant it small like this. It'll be 3 or 4 feet wide by the end of the year. And you save money when you buy it in a quart. If you're going to be planting trees, that's the time that you start looking at 5-gallon trees or 15-gallon. That's really a good size. Trees could be a little bit different. Often they're slow growing and you kind of want to have something that looks like a tree when you plant it. The counter intelligence on that is if you're planting native trees, like for example, oak trees, the best way to do that is from an acorn or from a slip. So having very small plants is actually much better when you're planting your native trees. But for many of us, we end up going with 15 gallons for our trees just to make sure that it looks like a tree. You don't need to really plant anything bigger than that. Now, remember I said you want to plant densely and diversely? Well, the densely part is important. A lot of times we get guidance that you only need a few plants per 100 square feet. But the truth of the matter is that the more plants that you have in the landscape, the better the landscape develops and the less water the garden needs. This is because the plants all work together in order to create that spongy soil that we're after. And as a result, the root systems and the spongy soil holds on to more water, which means that we don't need to irrigate as much in order to keep those plants happy. And when we have a density of plants of all different heights and so forth, we get shade for plants and also for the soil. So when we have a cooler system overall, we end up using a lot less water than we would if we had one plant here and one plant really far away. Pick your plants wisely as well. Know how big that plant is expected to get at its maturity. Um, when you purchased your plants, let's say you were going to buy 1 gallon plants. Uh, the 8-foot shrub is going to be in a 1 gallon plant, just like a 2 gallon perennial, or I'm sorry, a 2 foot wide perennial would be in a 1 gallon container. They're both in the same size container, but they get a lot bigger. In order to cover the same space as the shrub, you would need 4 of those perennials. So think about this when you're selecting your plants. Find plants that get very large. I know it's counterintuitive. People often think, oh, I want to keep it under control, keep it small, but think about how big it's getting. And it's a way to save money to plant, plants that are going to get bigger, cover more area. And really consider, do you need irrigation? Certainly, to get things started, we like to have irrigation, but if your lifestyle can accommodate it, it might be great to have parts of the garden that are not irrigated right from the beginning. There are places that you can hand water yourself, or maybe you have a gardener that can hand water. You might want to put in an irrigation system for an area that's further away from the house, and then have areas that are right near the house that you can use hand watering. It's something for you to really seriously think about. I know it's really counterintuitive, but when you don't install irrigation, you find out just how little water plants need. When you are actually tackling your irrigation, you need to be thinking about the condition of the system. If your system is old, I would say even older than 5 or 6 years, uh, it might just be beneficial to have a professional come and assess it. Perhaps your designer may be able to assess it, or you have a landscape contractor come and look at it. If the condition of your landscape manifold, which these are the valves that control your irrigation. If it looks like this needs complete replacement. I'm sorry to say. The question is going to be, if you're going from spray irrigation to drip irrigation, do you have a sufficiently good system to be able to convert it, or are you going to have to abandon it all and start again? This is a big investment. Irrigation's a big investment. You definitely want to bring in a professional to do anything that is plumbing related. And there is quite a bit of plumbing associated with your irrigation. We recommend that you use the professional for the trenching and the installation of what are called the PVC laterals. So that's what you're seeing here. This is the lateral line that is taking water out into the landscape. The professionals are installing that. And then, since this is going to be a system that's converting to drip, the property owner is going to install the drip themselves. And I'll show you that in a second. But getting the water out into the landscape, to the right places in the landscape, it's a lot easier to have professionals come and do the trenching at the proper depth, making sure that the pipe is glued together properly. This saves you money in the long run. And anytime that you are hiring a professional or buying equipment, or they're buying equipment, make sure they are looking for this WaterSense label. That you always want to have that, especially with new irrigation controllers, valves, and so forth. When it comes down to the tubing part of your drip irrigation system, this is something you can install yourself. It is not that complicated to do. You can maybe get a tutorial from your designer or even from the contractor, but installing tubing yourself is definitely something that you can do, and it's a lot of fun actually to do. And as I've mentioned a couple times, if you really want to save money, you really want to save water, hand water. I used to tell this to clients all the time, and they realize, yes, a lot of plants don't need that constant irrigation. They do perfectly well by being hand watered when they start to look really, like they're sagging. And it does keep you in touch with your garden. You really have a much better understanding of it when you hand water. Now, if you decide to not use a professional for any installation aspect of your project and you hire somebody who is, uh, maybe a professional, calls themselves a professional, but they're more like a gardener or a maintenance person, um, check to see if they're a licensed professional. If they are unlicensed, you are making the choice to work with them, and it's okay for you to do that. But I want you to make sure that you understand you are accepting the full liability for anything that happens on the property. You absolutely cannot go after them for quality of work, or if something happens to you, to the workers that they have there, or even your neighbor, your homeowner's insurance pays for it. So make sure that you go into it wide-eyed when you hire someone who's not a licensed professional, and you make allowances for that with regard to how much you're putting aside to kind of self-insure. And also make sure that they are knowledgeable. Like, ask them questions about, take these classes and then ask them questions. Uh, Another way to save money in your turf removal project, is to stage it. And we call this 25% for nature. It's basically a way to kind of get into the program by removing just a section of the grass. Here, we're taking the grass out 24 to 36 inches from the sidewalk, and maybe even from a driveway, or from, in this case, a wall. This allows us to get the rebate to do the work, and have an opportunity to experiment, to learn how to do the irrigation, and how to do the planting. It's possible that all of this is just still too much for you. And there's Brent showing you how to overseed your lawn. It is possible that if you're not going to get the rebate, you could keep the lawn in place and overseed it with a seed mix of plants, a lot of native plants and so forth, clover and things, and reduce the amount of water that you're applying to your landscape, but you're essentially converting it without taking out the grass and without doing all of that. It's a different kind of landscape, but it is a way to get you into the process at a low cost because you're using the seed. And then as your soil is built up, and as you get familiar with your garden, you can actually transition later by planting other plants into that mix, or even removing some of it later to plant. So it is a transition, low cost transition. Now, are there other ways to save? You betcha. Mulch can be free. You can reach out to tree trimmers and they will deliver mulch to you. I do want to just let you know that's fresh mulch, which is the best. I do want to let you know it's more likely, though, that they will be coming in 20-yard containers. So it's a lot of mulch when it comes. Get your neighbors. If you have green waste, let's say you've taken down a tree, or you've done a lot of pruning, you can do something called hugelkultur. Hugelkultur is a way of making the contours on your landscape by actually burying that wood into the landscape and making mounds like what you see here. So piling up the wood and then covering it with dirt and planting on top of it. Dirt, I said dirt, I meant soil. Putting the wood into your depressions, into the swales that are in your landscape, can actually enhance the functionality of those swales. And you're not paying for the removal of the material. You are recycling the what's considered a waste product back onto your landscape. And it looks beautiful after. It is simply a way of contouring your landscape. And it can be really extraordinarily beautiful. Definitely never use weed fabric. This is something that you can eliminate as a line item from any uh, construction budget that you get. No weed fabric for any reason. And oh, by the way, if a contractor is pressing weed fabric on you, think about getting another contractor. When you build your rain gardens, you absolutely don't need boulders or gravel. Just make the depression and cover it with mulch and plants. If you want to bring boulders in later, maybe for seeding or having like some really nice little groupings of boulders, you can do it as the garden matures. It's okay. It doesn't have to happen right away. And you can see here, you save a huge amount of money by not filling this whole thing up with gravel or boulders. Plant sales and giveaways are great ways to get more plants. There are a lot of online resources for people swapping plants, swapping cuttings. If you have a local, and I know you do, have a local horticulture society, every month they have a meeting in which they share seedlings and cuttings and all kinds of stuff. It's a great way to get plant material. You can also simplify your vision. Once you kind of go down the planning route and understand what your budget is going to be, maybe you go back and you say, hey, I don't need a really fancy space to gather. I could get a picnic table for starters and see how it works. Same thing with your pathways. You don't have to install the pathway and spend all that hardscape money right up front. You could make a mulched pathway and then add pavers later, or even dig it up later and pour the concrete. Start inexpensively, see how it works, and then you can expand afterward. You can definitely make your own water feature. I know from going online that there are probably 1,000 different YouTube videos on turning all sorts of things into water features. It's very, very simple to do. And oh, by the way, wildlife will really appreciate it. You can make your own compost. Highly recommend having a compost pile. You can also make your own worm castings. This is an excellent and easy thing to do. We call this soil party pizza. The soil party is the microbial activity in the soil, and this is the pizza, the food that the soil party likes to eat. So highly recommend you do the compost bin or worm castings at home. Treasures can be found at garage sales. And oh, by the way, the Facebook giveaways are fantastic. I have professional friends who have done gardens with Facebook giveaways. Building a simple birdhouse or simple bee structure to attract bees is great. Again, it's these things that make your garden feel alive. Don't be afraid to use found materials in order to build things. I mean, these trellises are very, very simple. They're just sticks. And of course, anything could be a planter, so you could go for it. Now, a couple of last thoughts. Don't forget that whatever you're investing in the actual design and installation process is an amount of money, of course, but there is going to be maintenance afterwards. There's going to be a continued investment that you'll have to make. As you're doing your planning, of course, you're going to be thinking about what are ways that I can reduce the amount of maintenance that I need to make in the future. But you do need to remember that you have to set something aside for maintenance. Even when we talk about low maintenance landscapes, it's not no maintenance. Every landscape needs help. This is a living system. It is not furniture in a living room. Definitely take advantage of these rebates and incentives. They're fantastic, and they can help you get on your way. I really think that design help is amazing. There are also other people in your community that can help you. The master gardeners in your area, their mission is to provide you with their expertise on sustainability and edible gardening. So if you're going to be going the route of planting edible plants, definitely get in touch with the master gardeners. They will help you with advice. Your municipality's Public Works or Sustainability Division might also have resources for you. There are probably some community gardens in your area as well. We really recommend, and I know it's an age where we don't talk to our neighbors, but a lot of these resources are best shared. Not everybody needs to have, a sod cutter, or if you do rent a sod cutter, maybe you rent it for a weekend and 2 or 3 neighbors share it. Sharing plant cuttings, certainly the mulch thing. These are all resources that it's really, you get a much discounted price on purchasing, renting, or having delivered materials if you buy it in bulk. So think about neighbors that might want to help out. And definitely enjoy the process. This is your opportunity to be in your garden. Instead of just having someone come in and design and build it, you can do a lot of this yourself, and the rewards are pretty great. I want to remind everybody that the next class, I thought the next class was gray water, but it might be rainwater capture. So October 23rd is our next class, and we look forward to seeing you there. Let's put up a little poll for an evaluation. I'm going to stop the share and take some questions. Maybe. What's going on? Okay, there we go.
Sorry, I had to figure out
That's
how to
okay.
launch evaluation.
We have a lot of new questions here. Let's go. What you were kept busy, it looks like.
Yeah, I also think Nick can type faster than me, or he has a really good copy and paste page because he answered a lot. So Nick deserves a lot of kudos for his work behind the scenes this evening.
Great. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah.
Lots of hands make light work.
Yes. I wrote a couple notes. So before we get to questions, just a couple things that I think could be helpful. From the very beginning, when you're planning a garden, when you start moving into the installation, do the things that are underground first. You want to go
Oh, that is such a good point.
from as deep down to what you see above. So if you need to run gas or electrical, those are going to be your deepest lines, then your irrigation, then maybe your big trees go in because they've got those big root systems, and you're going to work your way up to the surface. So I find that to be really helpful and can save you a big headache.
That is so smart, and I am adding those slides. Thank you.
There are a lot of questions about weed fabric, so I'll just address it here rather than typing.
Yes.
Anyone's so let's just debunk it right away. Weed fabric doesn't work.
It brings weeds.
So
that's what it's for.
Yeah. Whatever you cover your weed fabric with, because you're not going to just weed fabric and that's going to be your finished product. Whatever you cover it with, there is enough there that weeds can grow. Even if you put rocks down, the earth is moving, the rocks are going to touch each other, there's going to be a little bit of dust, and you would be amazed at how a weed can pop up. On a maybe more ecological perspective, you don't want any barrier between the atmosphere and your soil. We could get really nerdy. There's a whole bunch of nitrogen in the atmosphere, and plants need nitrogen. And if you're blocking it off, that's not great for your plants. So you want the free exchange of gases between air and soil. So don't put down weed fabric.
Yeah, exactly.
And lastly, weeds just grow through the fabric. We have plenty of pictures.
On top.
Yeah.
And especially on top, and then they put their roots down through the fabric and you can't get them out. Yeah, it's really bad. Big waste of money.
Snake oil.
If you have